the day of the robbery, Nadia's friend, who I would usually go to school with, because she went to a fashion school and I went to Apex Technical School, which is near each other, and we go to school in the morning. And she was like, as she would always do, call me in the morning, "You ready? Meet me outside." And I was like, "I ain't going to school today." She's like, "Why?" I was like, "I'm not going to school today." And it was because I had just planned out robbery with these guys. I remember being like, we were supposed to meet at a certain house to drive into Manhattan, maybe, I don't know, 2, 3 o'clock. I can't remember the exact time, maybe 3 o'clock, something like that. I remember being a little late and they was about to drive off. Like they was packing the car about to leave. And I was like, yo, like, wait for me. and I came in the car and, sometimes I feel like, geez, I could have easily just not been a part of that. I remember when I was in jail, I was just thinking that they didn't even need me to be there. They were about to leave me. I obviously ended up in tragedy.
Hey there, it's Light Watkins, and we are back with another incredible story from the end of the tunnel. What tunnel am I referring to? That moment in life when we think that all hope is lost and the worst has happened and that our life is basically over. If you haven't had your dark tunnel moment yet, or if you're currently navigating your way through one, these stories are here to remind you that more often than not, it's not the end of your life, or maybe it is the end of one aspect of your life, but it's the beginning of another. And this next phase is often where the real you comes out on the other end, right? The you that becomes a light unto the world, the you that stops defining success by how much money you have or how comfortable you are. And you start to define success by how much of an impact you're able to make in the lives of others. And today's story follows that script to a T. My guest is Marlon Peterson. Marlon grew up in Brooklyn, and to say he had a rough childhood would be an understatement. Although he was a great kid at heart and he did well at school and he was grounded in his religion, he was picked on and he was bullied and he was robbed and beat up countless times. And just when he was starting to become accepted among his peers, he got caught up in an attempted robbery. Even though he was just the lookout, he didn't have any contact with anyone who got hurt, he ended up facing life in prison. Next thing he knows, he's being hauled off to this upstate prison, and that was when his tunnel got the darkest. But he also struck up a correspondence with a teacher from the old neighborhood, and he began this letter exchange with some of her students. And guess what? Because of everything Marlon had been through in his life, he was uniquely qualified to offer these kids insight and wisdom into their issues and their traumas, into their brokenness. And one of them even referred to Marlon as her hero. Now, this of course gave him a greater sense of purpose, and he ended up initiating several programs in the prison where he was being housed. And he started mentoring these kids, and he started mentoring other inmates as well. The programs continued even after he was released 12 years later, where he became a role model for kids to help them navigate their trauma. In other words, he became the person that he wished he had had when he was growing up. How beautiful is that? And he ended up publishing a book called Bird Uncaged, which tells the full story of his hero's journey from hell to back. And I can't wait for you to hear it firsthand from Marlon in this episode. I think you're going to be inspired by his honesty and his resolve, considering everything that he's been through. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Mr. Marlon Peterson. Marlon Peterson, it is an honor and a pleasure to have you on at the end of the tunnel. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
We're going to start off talking about little Marlon. And so it's interesting. You grew up in Crown Heights, right? But you're from Trinidad. Your parents are from Trinidad.
For sure.
And I've talked to, I think, 3 or 4 people on this show who all grew up in Crown Heights. And they had the craziest experiences to report. So there's something going on, or there was something going on in Crown Heights back in the 90s and 80s and the 70s, that was just like, you didn't want to be over there as a young person. But before we get into all of that, When you think back to your young, sort of innocent years, what was your favorite toy or activity as a child?
What comes to mind is that I had Transformer action figures, and I remember I had Optimus Prime. My mother had bought it for me one Christmas. I think my father was upset because it was a Christmas gift, and there's a whole religious thing. But anyway, there was this Optimus Prime like action figure. And it was kind of like, I don't know, maybe like a foot long. And that was like one of my favorite toys. I remember that Transformer toy as a little kid.
For people who have never heard of Transformers, can you just give us a little summary of what a Transformer is?
Like these robots that save planet Earth. They are robots, but they can change into automobiles, all type of trucks and cars. Yeah, they transform to save the world from the other Transformers. I forget the name of the antagonist, antagonist, and they fight and they save planet Earth. And that's pretty much what they do every day.
And Optimus Prime is the head, is the leader of the good guys, right?
Like the god of Transformers.
Do you remember what you got out of playing with the Optimus Prime? Did it invoke something within you, or do you just like the way it looked?
I mean, he was the star of the show, or the cartoon. I mean, like he was the lead, Optimus Prime. I like the colors. It was a reddish color. He was the biggest guy, the smartest guy. He had the most, like Optimus Prime had us to say he's like the god of the Transformers. Like he was like, he also spoke of like this, like almost a Morgan Freeman. Like, he was like God in Transformer style. He had like this wisdom that he would speak in this voice. I didn't get a lot of, I didn't get like an abundance of toys. You know what I mean? So like the Optimus Prime, or I got little G.I. Joes at the time, but he was the biggest. Like he stood out amongst all of them. So, I mean, I don't know, maybe because he was the focal point of the cartoon. And I think that's why I liked it so much.
So you grew up, your parents were together. You have one sister, one brother. So what was that like growing up? Were you all close knit? You said just Jehovah's Witness. Your dad was Jehovah's Witness, and I guess he kind of was trying to get your mom into it, but she was she pushed back.
Yeah, she was like, nah. My brother and sister, my sister's 11 years older than me. My brother's 8 years older than me, so I came out of nowhere. And my sister and I were always close. She was kind of like, at some point, even like a second mom at times. Even for my brother, she was like a second mom. Because my parents worked a lot, and you know that story. My brother and I, though, were not close. And you would think like the two boys would be close. My brother and I weren't close really at all until we got into adulthood. And there was a lot of, as a kid, I didn't know why. I just thought he didn't like me as a kid. I didn't understand it. As I got older, I kind of understood the backstory of that stuff. But like, I didn't grow up liking him, right? In a sense, but I mean, not liking him, meaning that I didn't feel like he was like, I didn't feel like he liked me. So I just made the decision that I don't like him too, right? And because we didn't do brother stuff. We didn't hang out. We didn't watch cartoons. We didn't go to the park. We didn't play fight. We did nothing. We just like, we just kind of like estranged. And it's weird because we lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. So it was 5 of us initially before my nephew came along. But it was 5 of us who lived in this 1-bedroom apartment. And so imagine like we live in this 1-bedroom apartment, a small 1-bedroom apartment. And my brother and I didn't have any sort of relationship. But my sister and I were really tight. My father, especially, I was super tight to my father. My mother too. But my father and I had a different bond in that he, as you mentioned, he became a Jehovah's Witness. He became a Jehovah's Witness a year before I was born. And so I'm the first child of his children that, since he became a Jehovah's Witness. And his older kids, my brother and sister, they went because they were young, but they didn't really take a liking to it. And they were preteens. So they rebelled fast and they kind of just got out of it. But I was the one that was born into it. And I loved it. And that was our bond. My father and I had that, like we had a, son to father bond, but we also had like a spiritual bond that was different from any of the relationships I have with anybody else in my family.
Was there a strong Trinidadian influence in your house? And what did that look like?
Hell yeah. Like I always say, I didn't really know hip hop like that until like maybe 10, 11 or something like that. I mean, I knew of it, but I didn't listen to it. Yeah, we grew up acculturated as a Trinidadian family in Brooklyn in a way. I mean, I was in Trinidad in my mother's womb. My mother was pregnant with me the first time when she went to Trinidad for Carnival in 79, excuse me. And then in 1980, I was in Trinidad 3 months old with my mother and my sister and brother. And so the food we ate, the music we listened to, everything was sort of like a Trinidadian household. I remember Saturday and Sunday mornings was when we would have the West Indian radio station would come on. It was WLIB here in Brooklyn, in New York City. And that was the only time we heard West Indian. We didn't listen to the radio any other time because that day was our West Indian music. You hear about the news going back home in Trinidad. I mean, even to this day, I still consider Trinidad home, even though I've never lived it. Right? It's just sort of natural. I call Trinidad home, and I'm happy for that. We definitely were raised in a acculturated as Trinidadians in Brooklyn.
Did your siblings go to PS 138 or just you went to PS 138?
They went to 138 too, obviously years before me.
In your book that you wrote, you talked about the notorious PS 138, people getting their face slashed and all kinds of crazy stuff. You got bullied. Did someone prepare you for that before you went?
Nah, not really. You hear about like certain schools are like not good. I don't think prepared for it. I don't think there was any prepared for it. Like that was the only choice. There wasn't like a whole bunch of options in the sense of there was zone school. So you had to go to the school that was in your zone. And so we all went to the school that was in our zone, and 130 was it. So there's no preparation for it. It just
like your brother didn't say, "Hey,
definitely no.
Marlon, you got to make sure you learn how to fight or whatever."
The only thing I remember maybe first grade or so. I remember one time, I think my father was picking me up from school or something like that, and some kids were bothering me, and my father would tell me, even as a Jehovah's Witness at the time, my father would tell me, don't ever start any fights, but if anybody ever try to mess with you, you have to defend yourself. I remember him saying you got to defend yourself. But my brother and I didn't really kick it like that. We didn't interact in that way. So I don't recall him ever saying that in any sort of way of like, you gotta protect yourself or anything like that.
But even in the neighborhood, there was a lot of violence, people getting thrown off of roofs and gunshots at night and all of that. So did you normalize that as an elementary school child?
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing about normalization is that I didn't know anything else. You know what I mean? There wasn't like, well, when I go to this neighborhood or when I lived on that area, it wasn't like that. This is all it was. I didn't know anything else other than that. We didn't have, you had 5 channels on TV, right? So there wasn't like, you could, as now you can scroll online, you can see all these other places in the world, like whatever the 5 channels or so on TV, that's all you watch. So there wasn't a lot of exposure to like all the other possibilities.
What was the conversation in the house around navigating all of that violence and potential danger, particularly with your dad? Were there any lessons or any insights that he would echo, maybe religious in nature, about trusting Jehovah or anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. My pops was much more in the religious realm in terms of like trusting Jehovah, pray to Jehovah, make sure you study. Yeah, bring your problems to Jehovah. Like bring your problems to Jehovah, and He's gonna take care of it. And I believed it, right? And I felt like it was working at some point. Sometimes, I mean, my siblings definitely interacted with the violence in the neighborhood, but they didn't. It wasn't a conversation that involved me. Like my brother and sister had their own relationship. They grew up with each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they had their own thing, and I was this little kid that was like the little Jehovah Witness boy. So it's weird, like how we were in this very small space, but we had these different sort of lives happening, even if it's in a small little space in that apartment.
How did you learn to keep things to yourself when you were that age?
I don't know. I think that there was a level of, I never saw my brother being bullied or anything like that. I never saw my sister being bullied. I learned about it as I got older that, they had some issues of being like West Indian kids in school and people were bullying them for that. But I didn't know about it as a kid. So my brother and sister to me looked like they were like tough, like they could handle, like they didn't seem like they seemed tough, like they were good. So it was a little bit shameful for me because I was like, I'm not tough like them. I was a little bit ashamed that I wasn't like what I thought perceived as being tough, like my brother, particularly my brother. So I just figured out like, I want to be ashamed of like not being like him. I mean, I think that was one of the reasons why I kept it to myself. And also, once again, I didn't know anything else. It just seemed like that's what happened. Kids got beat up, people got jumped. So it's like, it's just what happens. Why complain about something that happens? Like it's part of being here. You just got to be tough enough not to let it happen to you. But it wasn't no other, I was a little kid. I didn't see options. It's just how it is here.
Tough for you was fighting back, and you couldn't find the will to fight back when you would get bullied and jumped and all of that.
it was the weird thing. One is that, there's this feeling like I grew up really entrenched in religion, and there's this thing about violence that, I don't want to engage in violence. They look down upon Jehovah. I don't want to, miss out Jehovah's blessing and all that sort of stuff if I fight. And I was scared. Let me be quite honest. I was scared that like somebody might really damage me. I remember, and I write about this in the book, but I remember, as I said, like as a kid, seeing kids, getting slashed, little kids being slashed. So, I always thought in these extremes, like it could be very good or it's going to be the worst, right? It's not going to be a fight. Like they're going to cut me, stab me, or, all those different types of things. So I was somewhat scared. I was scared of fighting initially. I fought as little kids fight, you kick and all that sort of stuff as a kid in the playground with your friends, but I was a kid who was easily intimidated.
So you still managed to become the valedictorian of your school, of PS 138. How did that happen? Would you have natural ability, or did you study your ass off? Or
I think a little bit of both. I don't know about natural. But part of the religion, my father would, before I could even remember, my father would read to me, right, from the Bible, and we call them Bible study aids, like other books that's associated with the Bible. He would read to me every night, and go into the Kingdom Hall as a young kid. Like, you would be encouraged to like read all these things, but also comment and speak on these things. And research. Like, I think, although I'm not religious anymore, one thing I do admire about it is that they encourage you to like research, like read, like figure this stuff out on your own. As a little kid, for my level, I would do whatever research I could. And my father would push me to do it. Like, he wasn't somebody, like if I asked him a question, he'd be like, "Did you look it up?" I'd be like, "No." He would know the answer, be like, "You got to find it." And I would be upset with it, but it developed a certain muscle in me. So by the time I was in sixth grade, I was working those muscles out already, and it trickled into my schoolwork. And also, schoolwork was a place that I knew I could like excel. Like, it was a place, it was, for what it's worth, it was where I want to say be cool, but it was a place where I knew I felt secure. And so I could throw myself into that. And, I gravitated. I liked learning as a young kid and all that sort of stuff. So, being a valedictorian, it's funny, I didn't even know what a valedictorian was before they asked me to be, but it was a tough year. Sixth grade was a tough year. It was a tough year for me and other things, but it maybe because it was so tough for me, that is why I sort of threw myself into my, my schoolwork.
you eventually got pulled out of the school.
Yeah, well, so it happens this way where when I transferred several times, a couple of times as a little kid. So from third grade, my mother and father, they transferred me to another school because it was a little bit better than PS 138. And we had to lie and say we had a family so we could get into another zone school. And then I graduated from that school, fourth and fifth grade, and I went to junior high school, which is IS 390, which is also it was the feeder of kids that went from PS 138. So IS 390 was across the street from Albany Projects. And it was, there was always stories about IS 390. And I went there in sixth grade. I got robbed within a couple of weeks. My parents took me out, and then they put me back into 138 for sixth grade. And then I finished up valedictorian and graduated from there. And then I, went on to another junior high school. So I transferred a few times between third grade and eventually seventh grade.
I was trying to keep track of how many times you would get beat up or robbed in your book. And it seems like it happened quite a bit. And you kind of learned to keep it to yourself, to not really tell anybody about it after a while. Why was that?
Shame. I just felt like I should be able to defend myself. And not only should be defending myself, but I was shameful that people would pick on me. Like, I felt like there's something about me that made me an easy target. And so, I just felt ashamed. I felt ashamed. There's no other way to look at it. And the other part of it is that, like, I wasn't the only kid that I knew about that was going through certain things. So one thing, it was regular. It was regular, right? Even as an adult, and I've worked with young people in my adult life, and I had kids come into my programs and be like, "Yo, this just happened." Or another kid would tell me about something that happened to another kid in the program. The kid who was robbed or assaulted wouldn't tell me, another student would. Same reason. They were ashamed that it happened to them. They didn't want to tell anybody. And I'm a boy, and as a boy, the idea that boys are supposed to be tough is something, we get that at a young age, right? And there's not anything malicious about it necessarily, just kind of like how in our society, I won't even say in our community, in our society, we want boys to be tough. And I didn't feel like I was living up to that. I wasn't living up to that standard.
When you look back at your young self as a grown man, can you see like how people would have picked on you or why they would have picked on you? And like when you're working with these young people now, can you kind of see which ones would be potentially targeted?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of my gifts working with young folks. Like I see, I can read things. And for me, looking back into the younger version of me, as a Jehovah's Witness, first of all, I walked around my neighborhood on Saturdays and Sundays with my father in a suit and tie with a Watchtown Awake magazine. So kids from my neighborhood or who were in my school were seeing me on these days. So I look like you like a dweeb. Like, well, you got here with a suit and tie. Get away from my door. I ain't selling to buy none of your magazines and all that sort of stuff. And then there's jokes. I also was very insecure about how I looked as a kid. I have big lips and people would make fun of that sort of stuff. And I wasn't slick with the mouth, right? I didn't have, like, people say shooting the dozens. I wasn't good with that, right? Mm-hmm. So if somebody made fun of me, I ain't really had no comeback for it. So that means, oh, everybody can make fun of me now. Like the worst days in school life was when we had the teacher absent. We had a substitute teacher. Because, substitute teachers, all hell breaks loose, right? Nobody respects the substitute. And so that means, like, you got to somehow make sure you feel safe in that class, right? Because the substitute teacher got no power. And so kids would pick on me on those sort of days. And I was a smart kid for what it's worth. And I behaved well, right? I was a kid that, so teachers might be like, hey, why you don't act like Marlon? And, that sort of stuff. And that's the worst thing you can do, right, in a class.
Right.
Why you don't act like Marlon? Oh, word, I act like Marlon. And and now we got to go to the schoolyard later, for lunch. I wasn't like, superficial. I didn't dress all that cool. Like I didn't have like, I dressed decent, but I didn't have like nice sneakers. I got daddy haircuts up until I was in high school. Like, I had all the
all the markings of a target. Yeah.
All of them.
And you said that the first time you felt loved was when your brother was willing to stand up for you. Can you talk about that experience?
It was 9th grade. And once again, I was early in 9th grade and I got jumped pretty badly. And the only reason why people found out about it because the teacher saw me laying on the floor, or a staff member, I don't even know it was a teacher, but an adult in the school saw me laying on the floor and took me to the dean and all that sort of stuff. So they called my mother, and my mother had recently been laid off, so she was home all the time. And I guess she told my brother about it. I didn't know that. So when it was time to leave school, they kept me in school. I had ideas. My plan was to like sneak out the building. I was just so ashamed I was going to sneak out the building and go home, but they wouldn't let me because they was watching me. The dean and all these people had questions for me. So anyways, dismissal time. As I'm walking out the building, this is Westinghouse, George Westinghouse in Brooklyn. And I was, same school that Busta Rhymes, Jay-Z went to. Like, that's a claim, right? But like, I remember walking to the front of the school by the exit, and I saw like a line of dudes. And my brother was a line of dudes, like bigger dudes. My brother's 8 years older than me. So in that age range, I'm 14. So these guys are like late teens, early 20s. And they up there like, who is it? And the person who did it, I know they already left the building, so I don't know who they were, but it felt like, wow, you came for me. Like you came here to look like to protect me in a way. I didn't even think about asking somebody to come fight for me or I didn't think about that. He just, obviously my mother told him and he just showed up with a crew. And it felt like, that's hood love. That was like, for me, that was love. That was hood love. They was right coming out to fight for me.
What did you want to be when you grew up, when you were that age? Did you have a vision of your life beyond Crown Heights and getting robbed and beat up and jumped every other week?
Yeah, I think funny. I think that like, nah, in my eyes, because I was heavily steeped in religion up until maybe 9th grade, like a 10th grade, I wanted to be an elder in a congregation and get married and, have a family. Like that was it. I didn't know. I figured I'd live right here in Brooklyn and have a family, get a city job or something. Like I didn't have a goal to be, I don't know, any sort of profession. When older people would ask, as they often do, ask young people what you want to be. I remember I want to be a computer programmer. I didn't know what it meant. It just sounded like a good thing. People always said it. I never touched a computer, never looked at anything about a computer back then, but it seemed like a good answer. So I would say it, but I didn't have no goal like to be a certain profession or anything like that. Like I knew I was good in school, but I didn't know what I would do with it. I just figured I'd just, in the religion, I didn't know what I would do with my smarts.
So then a few weeks later, apparently, this could be wrong because sometimes in books, it's not written in a linear fashion, but you're in Times Square and some stranger asks you to help him move some boxes.
Yeah, so I was also in ninth grade, and this is not too long after I would jump in Westinghouse. And I would often go, my sister worked in that area, so I would sometimes on Fridays to Baba Hush, her lunch hour, and also get some money. She'd give me like $20 and, that'd be big for me. And so I left her that, she went back to work and I was on my way to the train station to come home. And some guy, I don't know why, I guess I looked like prey. I looked like an Easy Vic. And he asked me like, yo, shorty, I'm moving these boxes. You can help me out with these things. I give you a couple dollars. I'll help you move these boxes. So I'm like a little nervous, but I'm like, yeah, it's a couple dollars. Like, why not? And, he obviously, that was his ploy. He manipulated me, kind of coerced me into going to following him to a hotel somewhere in the area in Times Square, on 8th Avenue side, the old Times Square. And he, leads me into a hotel room. Actually, not leaving. By the time, it changes. Like it turns from him being this nice older guy that wants me to help him the boxes to like, as I'm walking with him, like his tone is starting to change. And it's weird because his tone is starting to change. And in my mind, I'm like, I should just leave or I should just run. But I'm also like, I don't act like I'm soft. So I'm all these things, like, that whole idea of not wanting to be soft, right? So I'm like, I can handle this. And then I'm also not sure what he's doing. So I'm also thinking maybe I'm just in my head. I don't know why he's getting a little more aggressive and whatnot. Anyway, we get up, so we're in, because the idea is that he had to go to this hotel to get more boxes or more stuff. Mm-hmm. My dumb ass is like, yes, okay, I'm gonna go. And we end up going to a hotel room. As we get up we walk the steps, whatever, he takes the steps and not the elevator in the hotel. And as we are like, I'm like, I think at some point I asked him like, yo, what are we doing? Like, where are you going? I mean, then he changes completely. Like, get the fuck out of here. What the fuck you mean? We going, get the fuck up. And he's like yelling at me. And I'm like, oh shit, now I'm nervous. And we're in this narrow stairwell. So obviously, I'm stuck. And he ended up going to a hotel room, and we go to a hotel room. And I remember hotel, in these small hotels, as soon as you walk in the door to like a little bathroom on the side, on the right-hand side. And, you go in the twin beds. And on the first twin bed, there's a night table, a nightstand. And on the nightstand is a gun. And he picks up the gun, and he's like closer to I'm getting a lot of detail, but like he tells me to take my pants down. And I remember like, not at that point, I'm tearing, I'm like trembling. He's in the same aggressive manner. So I take it down. Then he starts just touching me. At that time, I was 14. I had never even masturbated at that age. Right? I was scared it was a sin, and so I didn't even know what masturbation was. And it sounds weird, but I didn't even know what that was. I didn't even know what I knew about. My father taught me about nocturnal emissions and all that sort of stuff, but I didn't know what it was, like what it looked like or anything like that, what it felt like. And he started to like, he puts his hands and his mouth on me and all this sort of stuff. And eventually, what I thought, I was like, I remember saying that I'm about to pee. I need to pee. I said, I need to pee. I thought I needed to pee. I didn't know what was happening. And it wasn't pee, obviously. And then at some point, like I said, can I please go to the bathroom? Like, can I please go to the bathroom? And then he eventually was like, yeah, go to the bathroom. And, the bathroom was right there. And I remember I had there's a part of me at 14 years old thinking I'm tough still. So I used to walk around with a combination lock. I forgot I had the combination lock. I would walk around with it just in case I had to hit somebody with it, right? And I don't know, it's not until I remember going into the bathroom and like crying and also like praying, like, why are you letting this happen to me? Why you like get me out of here? Why you don't make the stop? And I realized I got the combination lock, and I was like, so I remember I had it in my hand, and I walked like out of the bathroom and right to where he was. And he was still like in a position where he was in the room by the nightstand. And I just threw it. Like I threw it almost like around. I just threw it at him and ran. And I ran I ran literally all the way to the train station. And I came home, took the train back home, and I said nothing. And that was just something that had happened to me. I had never told anybody about. I just kept it to myself.
And you said that you started to become more distant from your father after that. Was that linked to the distance?
Yeah, I became distant from him. I became distant from the religion.
You felt like Jehovah had betrayed you.
Yeah, yeah. Like he betrayed me. Like, I was like, why do these things keep happening to me? Like I'm here, I'm being a good kid. I'm preaching. I'm in the Kingdom Hall. I'm giving talks in the hall. And like, why you letting these? And in my mind, like I believe I had this real close relationship with God, right? And I was like, why you keep letting this shit happen to me? Like I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to be doing. And my father was like a physical, he wasn't God to me, but my father was a physical representation of my relationship with Jehovah, right? Like, and I was like, fuck this. I was like, I'm tired of this religion. Like, I'm tired of like, I might as well just not be in this thing. If this stuff is going to keep happening to me, I'm keep getting robbed. Now this dude did this thing to me. And so my distance from my father came because I started distancing myself from the religion, and he didn't like that, obviously, and he would still try to force me to go, and I would find ways to lie, and I would sneak out, and I would make myself unavailable, and all the things. So I wouldn't go to the hall anymore, and that became a distance between me and him because I knew I was disappointing him. I started hanging out more and outside more against his will and sneaking out and all those sort of things. I started doing bad in school, so the distance came because I was like, I don't. First, it was a shame because I know that I'm doing things that he don't like. So that close relationship that I had with my father, it became a deep chasm.
But you were also writing. I think you had an internship at the opera or something like that. You were definitely expressing yourself creatively at that time as well.
Yeah, after ninth grade, so I had transferred to, after 10th grade, excuse me. After what happened to me, I was taken out of George Westinghouse. I remember telling you, I was jumped there, and they transferred me to Martin Luther King in Manhattan. And Martin Luther King High School is across the street from Lincoln Center, the New York City Opera. And a teacher there, a history teacher, I never forgot her name, Miss Nobley, particular interest in me, even though I never did any homework. I remember I just never did homework, but I would excel. I would read. I wouldn't do homework, but I would go home and read textbooks. It was a weird thing. Anyway, she got me to New York City Opera to do a summer internship, and it worked out well. I did well there, but that was it. Like it was just a summer internship, and I didn't follow up on it. I remember like years later, like a year later in high school, I remember seeing her in the hall one time, and it was around like college application time, like the end of junior years when you're really supposed to be like working on your college stuff. I remember her asking me like, "So, Mom, are you applying to what college you applying to?" And I was like, "None." And she's like, "Why not?" I was like, I was like, "For what?" Like, in my mind was, we didn't have money for me to go to no school. I never saw myself like going to a college, like away. It just some shit I just didn't, not I didn't want to necessarily. I just didn't see it as an option, And I was like, well, I'm going to stay here and go to community college. And I'm not knocking community colleges, obviously, but my brother had enrolled in a community college for a period of time, even though he didn't finish. My sister had enrolled in a community college at a time, even though she didn't finish. So that, I was like, I'm going to go to community college. That's what my older brother and sister did.
And what were the kids in the neighborhood like when they got older, like your brother's age? What were they doing? Were they going to college? Were they getting jobs? What was the role? What were the role models like in the Crown Heights at the time?
I mean, dudes had jobs. I mean, like the older dudes, like my brother had, they got jobs, whatever sort of job that they had, or they hung around. Like, I don't know what people were doing for money. I mean, people hustle. Like, I know also older, a lot of older guys hustle. They hustle good enough to look good. You know what I mean? Like they look good. They had all the latest everything, so they were doing fine by my imagination, from what I can see. Let me say this: what I was seeing was not who. I mean, there was definitely people in our neighborhood who were going away to college or getting into in the professional workplace, career wise. But I don't know. They weren't the people I saw. I mean, I'm sure of course there were people doing that, but it's not the people I saw. And I didn't know how, like particularly with the college thing, I'm like I just didn't know how that could be me. It may sound, as an adult now, it may sound somewhat like nonsensical, but it's just not what I saw. It's like me saying at some point I want to live in Moscow. Like why? Why? Like, I mean, of course it's possible, right?
Right.
But it's just not some shit that's in my sphere. You know what I'm saying?
Well, you kind of fell into a bit of I would say, the wrong crowd. We're going to cut to you not leaving your house on Thursdays because so many crappy things kept happening to you on Thursdays. You shot yourself in the foot. You broke your elbow. You busted your hand in a fight, right? And you're kind of with I guess, these guys who you feel a little bit more protected with, or at least you want to pretend like you're tougher around.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about that's summer 1998. That's a year after I graduated from high school. I mean, that was a tough year. Not even the summer, but because so it was a friend that shot me, and it was a mistake, but he shot me, and it was a Thursday evening, and then I broke my elbow playing basketball on a Thursday evening afternoon, and then broke my hand on a fight on a Thursday evening, and I got my chain. I got jumped, and the chain was stolen from me when I was with my little nephew at the time on the third. It was weird. I was like, something like I literally was thinking twice about going certain places or going out on Thursdays. It was weird. And I was just saying, yeah, I talk about where I had told my sister, and it may seem cliche in terms of like Black and brown folks and certain urban experiences, but I was like, I don't think I'll make it to 21 because, I wasn't no drug dealer like that. I might have sold 5 bags of weed and I was scared of that, right? But like, I was no drug dealer, no gun dealer like that. But I was around a lot of people. I was around a lot of things, and I put myself in these positions because it's weird. I look at it now, but I felt like it was safer than being just picked on randomly, right? Mm-hmm. It's weird. I was still being picked on, but at least it was happening less. And as teenagers, we think of this stuff out thoroughly, but it wasn't all that well thought out. And the people I put myself around, I didn't put myself around them for protection in the realest sense. It was just like the people I was rocking with before, it was soft. I was like, I'm just be around other folks, right? It ain't like I want to be. I didn't join a gang. I wasn't like somebody who would say, a big homie would say, Marlon, go do this, and I'll do that thing. I wasn't like that. I wasn't somebody who would be easily manipulated by people I was cool with, right? I wasn't a pushover by people I was cool with either. That environment, it felt more fun. It felt a little bit safer. It felt more manly, for what it's worth.
Well, it sounds like you were being accepted by
there you go
a group of people, and that's what you kind of longed for almost your entire childhood, is being accepted.
Yeah.
It didn't matter that they were not up to no good for some of the time. They were accepting you, and maybe these were the guys that would have been beating you up if they weren't accepting you.
Maybe, and they were older, right?
They were older,
also older, and there's this this thing about my brother, and I can find brotherhood in other ways, right, from other people, and it felt good to be accepted. Honestly, that's what it was. It felt good to be accepted.
You met Nadia around this time.
Yeah, the homie Nadia. So Nadia really was closer to my brother because they're around a little closer in age-ish. She's still younger than him, but and she used to hang on the block with my brother, and some of my older cousins would hang. So we met, in my teenage years, when I was like maybe 17, 18. But it's interesting, I was close to her friend, right? I actually might have went out a couple of times with her cousin, actually. So we weren't all that tight. We knew each other. And, what up, Marlon? We might have hung out a couple of times on the block and, that sort of stuff, but we weren't tight. We didn't get tight until I got locked up years later, like 5 years into the bid. I know we didn't get to that yet, but like, that's when we got tight. And Nadia, she always seemed like she was a round the way girl. Nadia was straight up around the way girl, but she was also like not around the way girl, meaning that she was around the way, but she also was doing some other shit. Like she was like, I gotta watch my words around her. You know what I mean? Like she around the way girl, we can hang out, but she's like, I can't be like, everybody knew they kind of like, all right, well, you can't fuck around with her like that though. She had a level of respect, I guess, that she just carried and walked around with, even though she would be around all the fuckery and all other stuff that guys would be doing in the neighborhood.
October 1999, you get invited to stake out this spot prior to a robbery, and you're into it. You're like, okay, I'll go. Don't leave without me.
Yeah.
Is that a part of that acceptance that we talked about earlier?
Yeah, definitely. Like, the mere fact that people like, it was dangerous, but I didn't see it as being like actively like some real danger, right? I don't talk about it often, but it wasn't the first time I had participated or tried to participate in a robbery, right? I remember, I don't know, maybe earlier, that's maybe 1998, somewhere around there. A friend of mine, we do this cab driver thing, and you had BB guns, and you would try to rob a cab driver, or we would try to rob the Chinese food delivery person when they, order food and try to, deliver, rob them for that. And I was just, in my eyes at the time, just having fun. Like if I needed food, I didn't need food. You know what I mean? I didn't need, I could get food, right? But it was fun. We hanging out. And by that time, I had developed this sort of tougher reputation. Because here's the thing, when people would rob me or when I got jumped, except for that one time when it happened when I was with my nephew and they took my chain, this stuff happened. It wouldn't be around people. So nobody knew this shit was happening. It'd be like out the neighborhood off my block. So nobody would knew this shit was happening. So when I'm around my people though, on my block, I was able to kind of still create this tougher exterior. So by the time, like when the robbery comes, opportunity to robbery, here's the thing, like, to me, it was just hanging out. And it's so sad when I say it, I say it like that because it ended up being extremely tragic. But I was just hanging out. And folks were like, we're going to stake out a store. And I was like, all right, cool, let me come along. I'm washing clothes right now. And it's so, I was literally in my apartment building, you wash clothes in the basement. And I remember what I would usually do, I would drop my clothes to wash, go back upstairs. When I was done, go back down and dry it. So I had time in between the wash and the dry. So I went outside. And my boy was like, yo, we about to go to stake out this joint. And I was like, yeah. Right. You really going to do that? He's like, yeah. So I'm like, all right, let's go. And I was like, I can come get my clothes later. And I went to Manhattan and we staked out the joint. And I remember talking to one of the dudes and I was like, yo, if I need another person to do the robbery, I'm down. You know what I mean? And initially they was like, well, we think about it. And then he came back later. He's like, yeah, all right, cool. And I remember me being the one that's like, yo, I'm gonna get a gun. Cause guns were around and available and all that sort of stuff. And they was like, nah, you don't need no gun. Just be there. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna just be there. I'm gonna just be there and see what happened. And I was nervous about it. It was this very ominous thing. The day of the robbery, Nadia's friend, who I would usually go to school with, because she went to a fashion school and I went to Apex Technical School, which is near each other. And we go to school in the morning. And she was like, as she would always do, call me in the morning, you ready? Meet me outside. And I was like, I ain't going to school today. She's like, why? I was like, I'm not going to school today. And it was because I had this planned out robbery with these guys. I remember being like, we were supposed to meet at a certain house to drive into Manhattan, maybe, I don't know, 2, 3 o'clock. I can't remember the exact time, maybe 3 o'clock, something like that. I remember being a little late. And they was about to drive off, like they was packing the car, about to leave, and I was like, "Yo, like wait for me." and I came in the car, and sometimes I feel like, geez, I could have easily just not been a part of that. I remember when I was in jail, I was just thinking that they didn't even need me to be there. Like they didn't even need me to be. They were about to leave me. I obviously ended up in tragedy.
Talk about that. Like 2 people got shot, 2 people got injured. You were the lookout across the street.
Yeah.
That was the only involvement you had.
Yeah, 4 people shot all together. 2 were killed. 1 was a store owner. Another one was an employee.
And he was like a pillar of his community, right? He was feeding the homeless and stuff.
Yeah, he used to feed homeless people from the store. It was a bakery, muffin shop. And he was also a gay man. And I think initially, because they didn't understand the way the robbery happened, the shooting happened so fast in terms of like they went in the store and within a second the shooting happened. So at one point, I remember my lawyer telling me that they thought it was like a hate crime because they thought we just targeted a gay person. I mean, I don't even know. I never went in the store, so I don't even know who the people, like I don't physically know who they are. I just know their names from reports and obviously the newspapers. But yeah, 4 people were shot. 1 person lost testicle. And yeah, it was horrible. It was horrible.
And you never had a gun. You never even went in the store. You couldn't pick the people out of a lineup.
No.
But you were across the street and you rode there with those guys. So you bailed, you went on the subway back to Brooklyn. And then what happened?
I heard shots happen and people were running all over the streets. I didn't know what happened. Like, I mean, I know my people had a gun, but in my mind, like they wouldn't shoot. Like, why would it happen like in 5 seconds? Like they went in the store in 5 seconds, like shots happen. I'm like, so anyway, I went home, I ended up taking the train home and turned on the news. And it was like, you have the special report, like, coming up at 5 or coming up at 6 o'clock or whatever it was, or 11, however they did it. And they had the news about the crime. And my co-defendant was on TV and they were arrested right there. The 2 men that went in the store. And that's when I found out that all that had happened. Like I understood the details of what happened.
And obviously they rolled over on you, made you out to be one of the main people
Yeah, it was five of us all together who ended up getting arrested, but I was the last person out of the five, the youngest out of the five. Two of the people made long, I mean, I try to stay away from, the way in which we talk about snitching in a way because like they snitched on me, right? But it's also, they were young black boys in a precinct with police, and I know the police try to do things to me to get me to do things, and they were broken. The police broke them down. Like these were 20-year-old boys who were, and in the street shit, like in the street realm, they snitch. There's no question about that. But I also just the way I was able to kind of like heal past that, even while I knew like they said things, they lied, was that like we're all in the same thing together right now. And they almost broke me. The police broke me down because the reason why I was end up getting indicted because I told on myself. I said I was there. I said I didn't do nothing. I was just there. And by stating I was at the place, that made me a part of the crime.
So they took you under the bridge by yourself. You had no lawyer, no parents were around. It's kind of like that movie When They See Us by Ava DuVernay.
Which is why I like it so much. Yeah. They arrested me at 5 in the morning or 6 in the morning from my parents' house and in Brooklyn, and crime happened in Manhattan. So they drove me to Manhattan, and it was, they drove me under a bridge. I realized later it was the Manhattan Bridge. And it's like this area under the bridge that they have parked me under. And they kept trying to come in the car and intimidate me. Like, but they want me to confess and say something. And the reason why they did that is because when they arrested me for my parents, my family. And we had a friend of the family who was a lawyer, but apparently like a divorce lawyer or something. He wasn't a criminal lawyer, but they was like, we're going to call Carl. And so the police knew that once an attorney got involved, they can't question me. So at that time, cell phones weren't a thing like that. So their thing was, I learned this also obviously later, but like their thing was like, the longer we delay going to the precinct where the attorney would eventually call, we can try to get him before we go to the precinct. And they tried maybe like an hour or so, and they had different detectives coming in, and this one, and you're gonna do this, and you're gonna get fucked inside, and all these sort of things to scare me. And all I remember saying, and this is why that movie When They See Us, so I wrote about it, why that movie connected me so much, because I remember saying in that car, I just want to go home. I just want to go home. I just kept saying, I just want to go home. I just want to go home. And I remember someone saying that, one of the kids in the movie saying, I just want to go home. And I was saying, then go home. And I mean, I didn't go home for a decade, but I didn't even know why they came to me, right? Like how they got connected to me by the time they arrested me is when I got into the precinct. I saw one of my co-defendants, one of the guys who was a part of it in the precinct. I was like, oh, he's here? Like, I didn't know other people were arrested, because there's 5 of us, 2 people were arrested at the scene of the crime. And in the days between, I was arrested 3 days after the crime happened. And in those 3 days, they arrested 2 other people. I didn't even know that. I didn't know 2 other people were arrested because I didn't know them. I only really knew one of the people. The other people in the crime, I just kind of met them like a day before, 2 days before. So the other guys, I didn't know. I had no idea to know they were arrested or anything like that. And, I was 19. I was also just like, I didn't know what the hell was going on. Like I always say, I didn't know what in the world was happening at that moment.
Did you have contact with your parents? Were they scrambling around trying to find resources to help you, or were you kind of all on your own?
I was on my own. I mean, I didn't connect with my parents or any family, anybody until, I don't know, maybe a couple of days after I was arrested, because I was in the precinct for a day. Then I was in central booking for maybe 2 days. And I didn't know how to use the phone. Like I would say, I didn't know jail. Like I knew people went to jail, but I didn't know about it, in any sort of intimate way. So I didn't know about phone call, like how you get a phone call, or, I didn't know there was a Manhattan house, right? I remember that's where they took me. In my mind, all we ever heard about was Rikers Island. Like everybody heard of Rikers Island. So I thought I was on Rikers Island. I didn't know where I was. So when I finally got housed in Manhattan House, it might have been a couple of days, maybe 2 or 3 days before I understood that I could use a phone and probably had the courage to try to use it. Because I was scared. Like, I'm in jail. I don't know how this works. You hear all the stories, so maybe a couple of days before I used the phone. And then I always remember my first phone call when I finally got to call my sister. I was on the phone with my sister. And at that time, I still didn't know where Manhattan, it's weird being in, I didn't know where it was. Like, I've been to Manhattan. I went to school in Manhattan, but I had never known there was a jail in Manhattan. And I didn't know where I was. So I remember asking my sister on the phone that day, I was like, where am I? Like, well, do you know where I'm at? And she's like, you're in Manhattan House. I was like, where is this? Like, I don't know where I am. And I had no sense of that, like, location. And, she described it to me. And I was delusional for those first couple of days. And the first time I ever had a visit or saw anybody was maybe 2 weeks after I think I was arrested.
You were remanded for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
No bail. You're in jail for 3 years before your trial comes up. What kind of time were you looking at? What was your mental state during that time? I mean, I know there's probably a whole roller coaster of emotions, but looking back now, if you had to kind of summarize it all, what would you say? Were you scared? Were you angry? Were you lonely? All of the above?
All of the above. I was delusional in a real way. I didn't know. I would literally pinch myself like, am I really? Is this like? I just didn't conceive that it was what it was, because initially we were all facing, at the time in New York, there was still a death penalty on the books. So initially, I remember my attorney, the same person called at arraignment, said, right now you're all facing the death penalty, but you're in Manhattan, and DA Robert Morgenthau is anti-death penalty, so you more than likely won't face that, but you all are facing natural life in prison. And
which means what exactly?
Natural life, exactly. Like,
it means till you die.
You die.
I thought life was like 20 years or something, but it means till you die.
Yeah, natural. He said natural life, and it could be 20 to life, it could be 50 to life, it could be all those things too. But natural life is like life with no parole. So that's what we were all initially facing. So that was also hard to conceive. I was like, I was in school yesterday, and now I'm facing life without parole. And I was like, I didn't shoot nobody, right? That's without question the hardest thing to sort of hear. And that's another reason why I felt so delusional. Because I'm like, how is it possible that I could die here now?
Are they tempting you to snitch and say, if you just tell everything you know, then you can do a plea for 2 years?
It was the crime was so high profile at the time. It made a lot of news. So, when you have these high profile crimes initially, they're not trying to get you. They don't want to offer you a plea deal initially, right? They want you to go through the ringer. So the first time they ever offered me a deal, though, was maybe, I remember July of 2000. So I got arrested in October 99, July 2000. I remember going to court, and I had a different attorney now. And he said, the DA wants to offer you something called being a queen for the day. It's apparently a legal term they use, queen for a day, where you go into the DA's office and you tell them everything you know, and there's no guarantee that they're going to offer you anything, but you got to tell them everything you know. But he said they are offering you at minimum 40 years flat if you do that. And I was like, 40 years flat, meaning no life, just 40. So after 40 years, you come home. I remember saying that to me. It kind of went in my head and went out the air, because it was like, I'm like, why would I do something like that? I just couldn't get it, right? And I was like, in my mind, I really didn't see the need for me to be telling on people. I was like, we're all here already. I'm like, we're all arrested. What do you need my help for? Like, we here. Like, I just want to go home. I don't see how that's going to help me. So anyway, they offered me 40 years. I didn't take it. And I just kept going back and forth to court for the next almost 3 years.
How did you adapt to jail life?
I was somebody who learned quick that I was super quiet. I didn't really interact with people at all, except when I played basketball. Basketball became my place of refuge for me. One of the places of refuge for me, I would go just play, and not even play with people, because when I got arrested, it was fall going into winter, and then the basketball court was on the roof of the jail. So it was like in a cage. So it was outdoors. So it'd be cold. So most people in the 1 hour rec that we would have wouldn't go. So I would just go by myself and bounce the ball and shoot and move, because that was for me. So that was one way. And I observed a lot. Like I just sat back and observed a lot of shit in jail. And it was like, this is things I'm not going to do. Okay, I'm not going to interact with people. I'm not engaged in these conversations. I'm not going to play cards. I'm not going to gossip. I'm not going to talk about the hip hop that I like. I'm not going to talk about what neighborhood I'm from. Like, I just wanted people to just not know who the fuck I was. And that for me was like, if you don't know who I am, there's no way for you to engage with me. Right. I didn't want anybody to become familiar with me, with the exception. There was two people, an older guy named Mr. Ringer and another friend of mine, G, who had a similar case to me. Interesting enough, G ended up getting sentenced to 50 years to life, but he was just exonerated a month ago after doing 24 years. But like, a reception of those folks, I didn't really interact with people. And I read a lot. I wrote stuff when I started journaling to myself. I started getting back into the Bible. So I just spent a lot more time into myself. I didn't rock with anybody. And I remember somebody saying to me, Marlon, like, your mom, people here think you crazy because you don't talk to nobody. And the only time you seem to really talk to people is when you upstairs playing basketball. And when you up there, you're like a beast. I guess that's where my frustration came out. And I like that. For me, that was like, this is exactly how I want people to see me. I want people to not know how to I didn't want anybody to know how to connect with me. I had observed that when people connect with you in prison, this is just how I observed it at that time. When people connect with you in prison, that leads to games and jokes, and games and jokes can lead to other things, people coming out of their face and taking liberties with you. And I didn't want to be fighting in jail. In my eyes, like, I wasn't afraid. By that time, I wasn't afraid of fighting. But I also was not in a place like thinking that I'm going to fight you today and think we're going to be cool tomorrow. Like, one thing I thought zero sum. If we fight, that means one of us is going to die. Like, either you are or I am. And I don't want to be in that position. So I want to avoid any situation that could lead to that type of physical confrontation.
Your dad also gave you some advice on one of his visits.
Yeah, he told me, Marlon, I need you to learn to become a man in here. And that was, some people might say, yeah, that's wonderful, right? That's great. And it is, but it was also scary as hell because his answer came in a context of like me asking him how you gonna get me out of here? I need to get out of here. And he's like, I'm trying to do all I can, but nothing I can do. I just need you to learn how to be a man in here. And what I took from that was like, oh, you can't help me. He's like, you pretty much telling me I can't help you. And that was scary because even as a 19-year-old kid who thought he was a man, hanging out in the streets, now I was faced with reality like, oh, shoot, I need somebody to save me. Nobody here going to help me now, and nobody could. That was a hard pill to swallow because it was the first time in my life I think I realized that in a very real way that I had nobody to support me in here. Like, I had no help. There was no way out of this, and it was just on me. And at 19, I had to grow up. So for me, it's like, oh, sure, I got to grow up fast. Like, and that's why I became super observant because I didn't initially know what that meant. Like, how do I become a man here? Like, what does that require? And I started figuring, that's why I said I sat back and started really observing people.
What did you notice about people? And when I'm asking that question, I mean, as far as how they ended up in there with you, like, I have some relatives who spent some time in prison, and they talked about how most of these guys just had bad representation or didn't have a lawyer, or like that's really the reasons why they were in there with all those years. Most of them were like really good people, just in a bad situation.
All of them were people who put themselves in bad situations, were put into bad situations. They were all people like me, just in variations. I would say I think everybody in prison is scared. Now, you don't see that. Like, people don't say that, obviously. That's not what they lead with. But everybody's looking over their shoulders. And when everybody's looking over when everyone around you is looking over their shoulders, that means nobody's trusting each other. And then people were frustrated, not only because of the court case that they had and the time they were facing and all that, but, you would see, when I would see people on the phone, like crying and or arguing or yelling and like I would see people crying to, with their kids on the phone. Like, they're talking to their kid or they're talking to their partner. And there'd be some deep pain coming out of them. And here's the thing about that. Like, I would see that in them. And then like later that day or another day, you might see them being like tough Tony, super tough, like, Kurt, fuck you, blah, 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 and all that. But like, that's part of the trauma of incarceration. And, you have to create you create images, this persona that helps you get by. I created one too. As I said, I was just like super mute. I'm not mute, but I became super quiet and laid back. I had to create a different persona of me that like, I might be, is this kid crazy? Right. And we figure out ways to get by. And so a lot of times the ways to get by are not healthy. They're not productive. They're harmful. But it's also like what you expect in a place like that. Everybody is at one of their low points at life. You put everybody at their low points in life. What do you expect? You can't expect people to be walking around smiling and smelling flowers every day. We're all fucked up. And we have no control over our lives. So, I mean, I value so much, like when I said I sat back and observed people, I think because I didn't, I'm actually now saying, I was realizing this with you now in this conversation, is that I often talk about later in my business when I began to really see people, but I think it was actually then, early on, because I had all my biases about prison and prejudice about people in prison and gangs and all that. So I had my own stuff. I didn't go in there feeling like, oh, this is all of us here, just like me. But I think I started seeing like people. It may sound like hollow in what I'm saying, but I really started seeing like humans. And I saw parts of them in me. Like I wasn't no big, I'm no big jail, no gun runner. I didn't do all that stuff. But they grew up in the same neighborhood, just like me. Like they were just like me. It's just that they went that way. You know what I mean? So in some way, I saw beauty in that. I saw possibility in that. And I think that's, as time went on, I think that's what led me to becoming much more willing to open myself up to people. Because I could see that, oh, wait, there's a human part of you that most people don't see and that you don't want people to see. But I know it's there. And I know it's there. And I can connect with that part of the person.
Was it a relief to finally get sentenced after 3 years?
Yes. Oh my God, yes. Because it was hard, obviously, to accept initially, to be like, damn, like, it's over. Like, you can't fight this case anymore. But it was like the hardest part of my time in prison of that decade were the first 2.5 years. There was no certainty. I would wake up every day not knowing what would happen. I mean, there's, a meaning in terms of like, will I ever come home or not? Because that was the options. Will I ever come home or not? Right. And when I got sentenced, it was hard, accepting it and all that sort of stuff. But it felt like, well, I know what's next. I know I'm going upstate. Right. I know I'm going upstate. I know that's happening now. I have a date I could circle on a calendar that says if I can make it to here, this is it. I had an answer. It felt good.
So your co-defendants got 50 and 40 years. You got 12 years. The driver got acquitted. How did he get acquitted? Did he have a great lawyer?
No, he had a court-appointed attorney. I don't know, man. So as you said, one got 50, one got 45, another one got 17 and a half. And then, so the prosecutor tried us separately. And the first guy who got 50 went to trial and lost. The other two who got 45 and 17, they pled to that term. And so after they pled, they came to me. And that's when they offered me the 12. And then my co-defendant, the last person, the driver, the person who's, the driver, he was the last person that they wanted to try, right? So by the time I was sentenced, I was already upstate New York in prison. And then they asked me to come down. They asked me. They made me come back down to New York City for court. And they wanted me to tell on him. Like they said, if you come back down, you come back down. I remember they brought me back down to New York City down here in Manhattan to the DA's office. It's like, yo, we need you to, testify against your co-defendant. And I was like, for what? I'm already upstate. I was like, what are y'all asking me to do this? It was like, why? Why am I doing this? I'm already in prison. You asked me to do this anyways. I don't know how he got off. All I know that is, one, I didn't testify, but a couple months after that, I was down here. They brought me back down here. I went back upstate, and maybe 2-3 months later, I called home and my sister told me that he got acquitted. He got found not guilty. To this day, I don't know. I don't know him. I don't know him. I don't know how he got found not guilty. I don't know what happened at his trial.
Your trial, you made a vow before the court. What did you vow at that point in time?
I vowed that I'm gonna be a productive person. Yeah, I'm gonna be a productive person to myself while I'm in prison and to my community. And of course, at that time, I was 22 by that time. So I didn't know what I was going to do when I got upstate. I had definitely no idea what I was going to do when I was eventually released.
Was that something you were feeling in your heart, or you feel like that was just a good thing to say at your trial?
I took time. No, I took time to write that. I remember writing that talk out, that speech I spoke at my sentencing. Mm-hmm. I took time. I thought that through, right? And I knew that, here's the thing, that even by the time I was sentenced, I had already become accustomed to prison, right? I had figured out how I wanted to, I already started living the way I wanted to live in prison, meaning I'm going to learn as much as I can. If dudes need help with something, I can give them some sort of help. I'm going to help them out. And that felt good to me. Remember, I was doing that as a little kid too, as a little Jehovah's Witness kid. I was doing that same thing as a kid as a Jehovah's Witness. So I gave it thought, and I knew that whatever it is, however I'm going to survive this prison bid, or if I don't survive the prison bid, I'm going to do it my way. And the way I want to do it is I'm going to I'm gonna be productive. I'm not gonna turn to that, how people think about the stereotypical prison person, right? I was like, I'm not gonna become that person. Mm-hmm. If I die here, I'm gonna die being like that. If I get out of here, I'm gonna get out of here being like that, because that's the way that brought me at peace.
Yeah, and you said in an interview, you said you don't want to give prison credit for your transformation. And when I saw that in the book, that to me was the moment where you transformed. Like prison was just a place where you happened to be while you were going through your transformation, and you had these certain number of options that you could use, such as working in suicide prevention, or you could write poetry, or you could start a correspondence with people. But that decision came at that moment. And whether your prison was a year or 10 years or 50 years, you would have been on that new track, that pivoting to that new direction of transformation.
Yeah. I mean, I can't know for sure, but I don't think prison was the intervention I needed. The life that I live now, even, I've been doing criminal justice work or anything like that necessarily, but even in my days hanging out on the streets and all that sort of stuff, it was still in me to like do stuff that I worked. I had jobs, not like I was just not doing anything with myself. It's just I didn't know what I wanted to do with myself. And that's what happens when you're young. You don't know what you want to do with yourself. That's like natural. When you're, particularly in your early 20s, you just naturally don't know what you want to do. It just so happened that, I'm in a certain position and certain options are available to me and ended up in prison. But like when I got inside, or as I evolved in prison, like prison, nothing about prison made me feel good. Nothing about prison encouraged me to like do the things I was doing with myself. Like prison, like, they weren't like CEOs saying like, Marlon, you need to do this, or like it wasn't that sort of thing. It was like me going into myself. And I realized like what I was capable of. Because even at being for most of my bid, I was usually the youngest person in whatever like housing unit I was in or whatever. And one, nobody would bother me. Like it was weird. Like in the streets, I had all these people would always be trying to rock with me, fuck with me and all that sort of stuff that we spoke about. In prison, that didn't happen. Like you would think of any place where people are going to see you pray and talk, it would be jail and prison with grown ass men, and you know what I mean. And it didn't happen. Like I always say, except for one minor incident, nobody ever tried to mess with me ever.
Why is that the case?
I think I said like I want to give prison the credit for my transformation. That commitment that I made, I said to you before, that like I will always be a productive person. Meaning, and a part of what that means is that like my reading, my writing, my wanting to help people and all that sort of stuff, that's a core of who I like to be. And when I was hanging out after the trauma happened to me as a young person, I felt like, no, I can't be that way because that's not going to get me through survival in these streets. And I realized like, nah, that's who I want to be. And that's who I am. And the consistency of who I was, that was my rep in prison. And people, one thing I've realized just in terms of humans respect consistency. Humans respect that no matter where you at. And people will always knew who I was. I never, because in prison, you can do this thing. You can go from one jail to the other jail. You be Light Watkins in jail number 1. You go to another jail, you be Killer Light, right? And people do that. I'm telling you, people do it. People do it, right? And I was always Marlon. Like, so I was consistent about who I was, right? And I think people respected that. Like, this kid is not involved in the shit. This guy is not involved in that stuff. In some ways, he might be a lame. He ain't into the drugs. He ain't all that sort of stuff. And I was like, nah, yeah, you're right. I'm not into that. I'm fine with that too. And I think the people respected me for that. I think that's what I generally feel. And because even now I'm home, I've been home for a while now. I always say it is like, there's nobody that can see me that through my entire 10 years inside. And if they see me now, they'll be like, and they have said it. Oh, this is who you are. There's no change in me. I think when I was growing up and trying to figure out who I was changing and trying to be this, wear that hat, wear this hat, wear that hat. And people probably saw that inconsistency. And that's why they saw like I could pick on this kid. You know what I mean? Whereas in prison, I was who I was, and I was committed to being who I was, no matter what, whether it could get me killed or otherwise, I was committed to who I was.
So you get this call from your cousin, Dev.
Yeah, Devon, my guy. That's my guy. maybe 5 years into the bid, I'm already upstate. We're on the phone. He says, like, remember Nadia from the block? I'm like, yeah, I remember Nadia. He's like, yo, she said she want to reach out to you. She a teacher now. He's like, yo, she a teacher now or something. And at the time, Devon is like in high school. And he's like, she a teacher. And she said she want to reach out to you about something. He's like, is it okay if I give her your information? I'm like, yeah, whatever. In my mind, people always say they want to write you. And I'm like, yeah, give us her information. I didn't even think twice about it. Maybe 2 weeks later, she writes me and she's like, yo, Marlon, how you doing? Pardon me for not being in touch and blah, blah, blah. I'm a teacher now. And, I teach middle school kids. I know about your story, your situation. Because by that time, Nadia had become like part of our family. Like, she's like family to us by that time. And she's like, I want you to, if you could write a letter to my kids, my students about like experiences, maybe some words of wisdom. And it blew me away because one, like I said, Nadia and I were cool, but we weren't cool like that before I went to jail, right? So I was like, why me? Like, first of all, why me? You don't know other people? And then the other part was like I'm here. I was in prison. Like, you know what I'm here for? Like, why would you want me to write your kids? Isn't that like a bad idea? You know what I mean? And I became that conversation with Deb that turned into that letter from Nadia that turned into a correspondence program with her students, completely changed my trajectory for life.
Did she ever say in hindsight why she reached out to you? Why did she think you would be good for this? Did she know you were writing? Did you share any of your poems or something with Dev and he may have talked to her about the stuff that you were saying? Like, where did that idea come from for her to reach out to you?
I mean, she's always been, she's educated now. If you know anything about Nadia Lopez, she's like, she does things non-traditionally, but she's good at it as an educator. So I think that's in her DNA to do things non-traditionally, but also to really do whatever she needs to help young people. But in terms of why me, she didn't see me as this like what we think of a stereotypical kid who was just in the streets doing all the things, right? All the robbery. Like she knew, everyone knew that this wasn't like my course. Like this was my MO, my
right. She MO. Saw you. She knew you. She knew you, the valedictorian, the kid, the sweet kid, and just caught up in a bad situation. And...
Yeah, exactly. And I guess that was it. I don't know. That's a good question. Like, I don't know if I've asked her that. And we talk like every day. I don't know if I've ever asked her like why me particularly. Like, because she from the neighborhood. She knew other dudes that got locked up too. So
right. And you've been in for years at this point. Yeah, I'm wondering if she saw a movie or read a book or
she saw Redemption. Tookie Williams, the movie that Jamie Foxx played in. I remember that. She had said that like she had her students watch that movie and she had them do like write letters in support of Tookie Williams' clemency. Obviously it failed, but she wrote that. So that's like compelled her to probably think about prison and reaching into prison. But I don't fully know why me. When we're done with, I'm a Marco Polo, because that's how we communicate. I'm a Marco Polo and ask for that particular question.
You get this package back from her class. And you said that you would have thought those were your release papers. You were so excited. And you had a roommate. Was your roommate's name Light? Is that what you were saying?
Oh, wow. Yes, his name was Light. We called it. His name was Light. Yeah, he was Light. Yeah, like, wow, he did some shit. Yeah, his name was Light.
So you get this package. Light thinks it's for him, but it turns out to be for you. And what do those letters say?
Man. It was mailed from her school, right? So the return address was from the school. It wasn't from her house, right? So that was the first thing. I'm like, I hadn't, her first letter to me asking me to be a part of the project was from her home. This is from the school. So I'm like, that's the first thing I'm like perplexed by. And then I open it and there's a letter from her thanking me for it and all that sort of stuff and then introducing what comes behind her letter, which is 17 letters from students. And that wasn't a part of it. Like, I remember she said, Marlon, can you write me some words of wisdom to share with my kids? I didn't know they was going to write me back. Like, that wasn't a part of the conversation. And I remember getting that letter. I mean, reading, first of all, just seeing that they wrote me. And I think I was just overwhelmed because I just didn't, at that time, I couldn't see why they would see, like, why would y'all want to write me? Like, I'm in prison. I'm here. Like, why would y'all care to write? I understand it now, but like, I couldn't get it then. So I was overwhelmed by it. And they were writing to me like as a teacher almost. It just couldn't get, at the time I'm 24 or 25, somewhere around there.
One 13-year-old girl called you her hero.
Yeah, and that stuff like that. As much as I was like beginning to grow and help other folks inside, I was in prison, and for the rest, I still saw myself as a piece of trash. Right? I mean, I was there, right? And I knew, and I had guilt, right? I was a part of something that was horrible, and I just couldn't see, like, why are people still valuing me? Kind of like I'm here, like you don't see where I'm at. I was at the lowest rung of society. So when that little kid, when that young girl said, "Marlon, I see you as a hero," it was hard to understand. And it was hard to understand like why at the time. This is why I'm so invested in young people because like they helped me and I'm there to help them. That's why I'm the adult. I'm giving you some words of wisdom. I had some life experiences, etc. And they were helping me because as the letters kept going back and forth, they started looking at me for advice about stuff that was going on in their neighborhoods, in their communities, in their homes. They were telling me things about their trauma, this type of stuff that I would keep to myself. They were telling me and asking me for advice. And I was like, first of all, I wish I could be so open about talking about things that's happening to me. And once again, why me? What are y'all seeing in me that y'all think I can offer you something? And I think that's when I'm not going to say it's genius talent, but I watch this interview with like Jay-Z. He talks about genius talent, right? And I'm not saying like, what I'm saying is like is a point when you come in like when you understand one of your gifts, like you understand it, like you've been doing it for a while, but you kind of like, oh, this is a thing here. I can do this, and you have a name for it. And you could title it. And I think at that moment, like as I said, I was helping people inside and doing things what I can with individuals. But it was I think in the process of work with those young people that I was like, oh wait, this is a thing here. Like I can communicate with people in a way that helps people, and I understood it. And so like after that program, or even simultaneously with that program, I eventually get transferred to another prison because that's how prisons are. They transfer you. And I got opportunity to like be a part of this program where it was called Transitional Services, helping other men, preparing other men, and creating curriculum and facilitating classes and workshops and doing one-on-one counseling. And in so many ways, it was like an expansion of what I was doing with those young people. It was just in front of me. And I had never saw that for me. Never saw it for me. And definitely not in jail. I mean, that's kind of like why I can say I got a book now, right? Like the thing that led me to the place where I have a book now, or all the work I've been able to do, is a direct result of those young people.
You also said you became a disruptor in prison.
So when I started running the transitional service program that I spoke about, the gentleman who ran, like it was all men inside who ran it. They were still like with the supervision of like staff in the prison. But we ran the classes and all that sort of stuff. The man who was running it before me, the incarcerated man who was running before me, he had finally got released. He did 27 years, he was released. And the other men who worked in the program, older than me, was like, yo, Marlon, you think you should be the person to run it? I was like, what? Like, why me? Like, I'm younger than all of y'all. I got less time in than all of y'all. Anyways, so I eventually took it on and ran it. And the prison wanted us to they had like their own curriculum. They wanted us to do things in a certain way. And it was arcane. It was out of date. It was not connecting. And so I would create my own shit and create my own curriculum and do things that the prison didn't necessarily like in terms of how I would get information and people inside. And, we eventually, we had a partnership with the college, Vassar College, where students would come in and I would get the students to like bring in certain information, like reentry information and resources that the prison, for whatever reason, didn't want us to get. And I would do it, but I would get in trouble for it a lot because they would know it was me. Like one example is that we had this thing with the students, the Vassar college students who would come into the prison in the program and they would interact with the men inside. And we had this thing that we called Tech Friday. So Tech Friday would be like the students, the Vassar students would like create these poster boards of like new technology stuff. Like they would paste stuff of like cut papers out and cell phones and laptops and all that sort of stuff, because we were inside and we didn't have access to those things. I remember one day they came and they searched, the CEOs came and the school buildings where we had these classes, they came and they locked the building down and they searched all our stuff and they targeted me and they came to my cell and took my stuff. And it was like, because I was violating their rules by bringing that in. They thought somehow I was bringing in cell phones. I was like, They brought poster boards up or something. Like, these are pictures. Like, it's a picture. It ain't a cell phone. Anyways, I mean, that was just one example of it. But I would go back and forth with administration a lot because I became a vocal against administration. And I knew I was doing it for other people. And once again, I had that date. I knew when I was coming home too. But like I feel like I'm in a position to disseminate information to people. That means I'm a position of leadership here. If I'm a position of leadership, then I have to stand up for our people, for my people. And if I got to take the fall for it, I'm going to take the fall for it. Because I can't, once again, remember I said before, like I saw the humanity in these men. I said, I see this. I can't deny that. And I'm not going to be just like the administration. I see this. I need to get this information to them because they need it. They need to be able to be better themselves, you know?
Yeah, there's so many gems from your reports of being in the prison. We can't get into all of them, but you did end up spending 3,722 days incarcerated. And then you started several programs. Once you got out, you implemented Holler, which was what's the acronym stand for?
Yeah. How Our Lives Link All Together.
Yeah. You started that at 2 schools in Brooklyn, and you started mentoring thousands of kids. Getting out of prison, what was that like for you in terms of your purpose? Like, did you see that as a relief, or was it just an extension of what you'd already been doing and now you could just do more of it?
Oh, it's definitely an extension. It was definitely an extension because even with the Holler program that me and a couple of guys started from inside, like when I came home, when I implemented it in the schools, the basis of the curriculum was created in prison. Mm-hmm. It's just that now I get to implement it. And a lot of the skills that I developed in terms of curriculum development, public speaking, and like I had started doing those things inside, right? And here's the thing, when I came home, I didn't know that I was going to be doing the work that I was doing necessarily. I knew I wanted to go to school. I was like, when I come home, I want to get another degree. That's the only thing I was really certain of. And I was like, maybe I want to write too, but I didn't know how or what, how that would work out or what to do, right? I didn't know how to begin getting things published outside at least. But it was definitely an extension. Like I go back to those young people and Dr. Lopez, Nadia Lopez, that they helped me realize I got this sort of ability, talent, gift, desire, whatever it is, to help folks and get information to people and to empower people. So when I came home, like, it's weird. I had this thing where I say, you attract what you attract. So the opportunities that I had in terms of like, and some of them would come to me. I don't mean anything sort of like metaphysical way, or maybe I do, but these things would come to me because this is what I was sort of like involving myself in. Working with Holler when I came home, that was a volunteer, and I ain't had no money, but I would run this program with these kids because I cared. These kids were my age when I was going through the trauma, so I care about these kids, right? And then I have opportunity to take kids to go to create college trips. I had never done that shit before. I didn't know what that did, but like the opportunity came to me. I was like, oh, let's organize college trips for these kids, right? And it'll go on and on and on and on. Or I would bring people who I knew from my community into these opportunities, into these programs. So it was definitely an extension of what it is that I was sort of training myself to be.
You've gone on to become an author. You're a TED Talk speaker. You got your degree from NYU. You traveled all over the world. When you come home at the end of the day after doing all these wonderful things, how do you feel? I know you mentioned in an interview that you're still grappling with your deserving of happiness. So that's where this question is coming from.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. Prison and prisons, plural, I'm speaking somewhat metaphorically also. It does this thing where, like, even if you're out of the cage, it still struggles to maintain a grip on you. And so the feelings of unworthiness, guilt, like there's a struggle. It still tries to encircle me. And so I realize I'm happy for the work I'm able to do. And I know that I'm impacting people. Like that matters to me. So at the end of the day, as you had asked, I feel like, oh, wow, man, like somebody sent me this email or they DM me or whatever it was, how much it's impacted, and whether it be some work I did, a program, former students, former mentees, like I help them, you know what I mean? And that feels good.
Mm.
And then the other part of it, I think when I talk about the part about, these prisons, plural and metaphorically, whenever I do something wrong, whenever I make an error in life, in a decision, sometimes what happens still is that, like, see, Marlon, fucking up again. And then sometimes all the things from the past can sometimes come in and conflate, right? And I'm much more aware of it than I was. Like, I've gone through bouts of depression in recent years because of those things. But the other part of it is this, is that, like, just like those kids again, when people pour into me, when they say thank you, or they're like, wow, just help me out, or, whatever it is, how about someone impacting them, that reinforces the goodness in me. Like, no, Marlon, you're more good than not, Marlon. Like, you're creating opportunities and empowerment for other folks. So that helps dwarf the stinking thinking, I've heard people say.
It's almost like your brokenness that you accumulated along the way from the rape experience and, just all getting beat up and robbed and having to go to prison. It makes you more relatable to the kids, and you can relate to them and they can relate to you. And it gives your words and your expressions more power. You've also said that prison doesn't rehabilitate people. Getting older and more mature is what actually rehabilitates people. And going through all of these experiences.
Yeah, look at Malcolm X. I mean, look at the brother. He just got older. Brother just got older. I think just thinking like almost in a data way, just thinking about like people go to prison, the peak age for people for incarceration are between their late teen years to their early 30s, late 20s, right? That is the peak years for incarceration. And people are still evolving at that time. You're all evolving. It's just that particular Black and brown people in certain communities with police more, there's different options available, all those sort of things. And I grew up. I just grew up. You know what I mean? I mean, I don't want to make it sound crass or insensitive to what it required for me to grow up in terms of the crime I was a part of. But I'm just saying, ultimately, I grew up. Like, I grew up and I evolved and I matured, and prison, like, you don't need prison to mature, grow, or evolve. You don't need that. I'm just saying, like, we don't need that. Like, there are people who do a lot of things and they just grow up and they're mature. Most drug dealers, like the kids I remember growing up as being drug dealing kids and all that, they all around in their late 20s, mid 20s got city jobs. And they just stopped doing drugs. They got city jobs. They had a kid. They got a family. Like, they grew up. I don't think we factored that in enough. That, like, rehabilitation is just also evolution.
Final question. How do you define success for yourself these days?
I hate when I ask people these questions. When people ask me these questions, I'm like, damn, I want my book to do well. I want people to read it. I want a lot of people to read the book. I think it'll help a lot of folks. That'd be success for me. If a lot of people get to read it, and it could, support people in their growth and evolution and prevent. And that's not quantifiable, but, like, for me, that's success. I think success for me also, on a much more personal note, is being able to triumph over challenges of intimacy. I think that's on a more personal note. I think that is the one, like, the last chapter, the last sentence in my book is happiness is next. And that's many things, success in the book, success profession. I still want those sort of things. I do know that one of the cages, I speak about cages in books called Bird and Cage. I think one of the cages I still need to find freedom from is the cage of not being open to levels, relational intimacy, like romantic intimacy, right? I think that's a struggle for me. And there's a lot of reasons, my past plays a huge role in that. And that, for me, that's another role of success, because I think that's the highest vibration of humanity, I think, is being able to accept love. Like, I think I've always struggled with accepting relevance and worthiness. But I think the other part that I still struggle with is, like, love.
As a disruptor and change maker, what do you need help with? Like, if someone's listening to this conversation and they have resources or connections, like, what is something that to make your mission bigger with the kids and the programs, is there anything you could use that someone could help you with?
Yeah, I want to get this book or variations of this book or my story on the screen.
Okay.
For listening, I think, once again, this sort of thing about, I accept that people look up to me. And I'm not only talking about young people, I'm thinking about adults as well. I accept that and I honor that. And as I progress, I know people feel a part of, like, they're progressing too and triumphing over challenges as well. And I think, like, being able to speak about not only my life, but the experiences I've seen, Brooklyn in the way I saw it, Trinidad in the way I've seen it. I think it could help a lot of folks, right? I just really feel like, I've been through some extraordinary shit, bro. And the only way I sometimes make sense of it is that it's also because I went through these extraordinary things. It's my job to sort of to share it with people in an extraordinary way. Because that's when I make sense of a lot of things I've sort of experienced and seen, and people who have said things to me and have poured love into me. So yeah, some people want to help out like that. I mean, I think about that. I mean, I'm not good about asking for money and all that sort of stuff or things like that. And that's not really, those things come. But yeah, support with that. I really want to get this on that on a larger level. Because the other thing, I've traveled the world too. I know one thing, I've traveled the world and I've been in prisons in other parts of the world. I've been in hoods and ghettos and in all the parts of the world. And I want to be able to share the brilliance and the resilience of all those places too, just like my ghetto here in Crown Heights,
Well, the book is called Bird Uncaged, and reading it is indeed a transformational experience for anyone, really, just because it gives you a glimpse inside of a world that I think a lot of people who don't live in Crown Heights will be able to blow their minds, just at all the things that you've gone through. But also, just kind of looping it back around to where we started, it's kind of like its own little Optimus Prime, in the sense that that experiencing this story is transformative, not just for the reader, but you see how much of an impact you've had on the people in prison and on these kids, and taking that trauma and that brokenness and transforming it into something that is enlightening and productive and inspiring to other people. So yeah, I just want to acknowledge you, man, for writing the book, because we could do a whole podcast just on the process of writing the book. And you, like we talked about before the interview, you put it seems to me like you had no filters. You put everything in here. And I think that's really a beautiful and important, just to allow people to understand that even our heroes have flaws. And that's again, any superhero movie, the Transformers, any of it, they all have weak spots. They all have blind spots. They all put themselves in positions where they get exposed and exploited. And yet at some point they have to have that moment of truth where they say, look, I'm not going to play the victim anymore. I'm going to become the hero of my story. And I'm going to become the best version of me. That was a part of your hero's journey. So I just want to acknowledge you for showing up in that way, and for being an example for anyone else who's going through those kinds of challenges in life, to also see that, look, there are options, even in the worst situation at the depths of hell. There are things that you can do to make the world a better place. So thank you for that. Thank you for showing up that way, and for sharing your story, and so openly and honestly.
Thank you. Like the sign of a great conversation interviewer. I mean, I had never been asked about a toy as a kid, and I had never even thought about Optimus Prime in that way since I don't know when. And I mean, again, me think about that, but also how you kind of just bring, full circle at the end. And thank you, bro.
No doubt, man. Thanks for the conversation. I really appreciate it. And hope to cross paths with you at some point soon.
We will.
Thank you for listening to my interview with Marlon Peterson. Marlon's new book is now available everywhere books are sold. It's called Bird Uncaged. It is an excellent read. Marlon also has an incredible TED Talk, and he's got a podcast called Decarcerated. And to get the show notes and a full transcript of our conversation, you can always go to lightwatkins.com/tunnel. While you're there, make sure you sign up for my daily dose of inspiration email, And you can pre-order my upcoming book of inspiration, which is called Knowing Where to Look, 108 Daily Doses of Inspiration, which comes out on May 25th. But please pre-order it as soon as you can. And also, don't forget to leave your rating or review for this podcast so we can help other people find these inspirational stories. And like I've said before, your review could be the one that inspires someone to give this episode a listen, and that could end up changing their life for the better. So I just want to thank you in advance for taking the 10 seconds that it takes to click on the Apple Podcast app and the name of the episode and to scroll down where you see ratings and reviews and just leave a 5-star rating and or a couple of sentences about what you enjoy in this podcast. In the meantime, I'll see you back here next week with another amazing story from the end of the tunnel. And until then, keep trusting your intuition, keep following your heart, and keep taking those leaps of faith. And if no one has told you recently that they believe in you, I believe in you. Have a great day.